Hello once again, I'm Cosmic and welcome to another episode of Early Access Examination. On this episode we're going to be taking a look at H1Z1, a zombie survival MMO in development by Sony Online Entertainment. H1Z1 follows the seemingly endless trend of zombie survival MMOs like the DayZ. Interestingly enough, the game is set to be a free-to-play MMO, which raises the question why the developers are charging $20 essentially for the privilege of testing the game out on early access. Indeed, that practice annoys me greatly, and no matter what way you look at it, it's a cash grab from SOE, plain and simple, no matter how much you try and justify it. As with any unfinished early access game, the game is packed full of bugs, which is a given in early access, which kind of left me puzzled why many reviewers complained about a broken game. I mean, come on, it's in early access, it's an alpha, what did you expect exactly? Don't get me wrong, I'm completely against the fact that they have a fully working in-game microtransaction store while the game is so unfinished, and the fact that they're charging entry fee for a free-to-play MMO. At the same time, however, just some people have come across like they were expecting a completed game under early access and were horrified at the state of the game, which I feel has placed some undue criticism in certain aspects of the game. Saying this, the developers have been working since release and have released several patches since the launch in early January, so the stability of the game is slowly improving. Now, the game is set during a zombie apocalypse in the rural United States. The world map is fairly large, but it's not the largest compared to other games, and the world is pretty nicely designed. There's a good combination of urban areas and more rural locales. There's plenty to see in the world, and just going off and exploring can sometimes be fun, but it also can lead to 40 minutes of running through trees, not knowing where to go. One thing I do like is that you don't have a world map on your HUD or on your character in general just to open whenever you please. To get your bearings in the world, you must find a tourist map, which is usually located upon entering a town or a landmark. These are simply poster maps placed on a wooden board, and they will show you the grid section of the world that you are in, and it will tell you your current location, and it will show you the roads in the nearby area and the nearby places of interest. Not having a map that you can just pull up whenever certainly adds to the game in a good way, and it does reinforce the survival aspect. It forces you to rely on your sense of direction, your memory, and your map reading skills to travel and navigate the landscape. When you enter the game for the first time, you will be spawned at random in one of the sections of the world. You start with simply the clothes on your back, a bag full of bandages, and a flashlight. The game's controls are fairly simple. Walking, running, and looking around is all easily done with the keyboard and mouse, and the controls are fairly intuitive. Your character has a health, stamina, hydration, and hunger bar. Stamina will deplete as you run, and your health will decrease of course should you take damage. The hydration and hunger bars will constantly deplete, and should you starve or dehydrate, you will die. Hunger also affects your stamina regeneration rate, so the more well fed you are, the quicker you'll regenerate stamina. Now, scavenging for food and water is all part and parcel of the survival genre. The problem is the bars deplete so fast and far too rapidly, which causes you to kind of slow your progress significantly because you have to stop every 10 minutes to eat and drink. This problem is intensified with the fact that the actual bloody loot is scarce to find. I have spent hours trawling through houses without a single find. The sheer lack of loot while scavenging is a big problem in the game, and it becomes very frustrating when it happens to you in every aspect. This leads you to find the only widely available food source there is, which is berries from berry trees. I have spent more time in H1Z1 walking and eating berries than doing anything else. The sheer lack of loot and the fact that the bars deplete too quickly literally cause the game to become a berry picking and eating simulator. Looting has gotten better since launch, with the respawn rates being tweaked, but even that, should you go online during a high population, you're pretty much boned when it comes to finding anything of value. The game also suffers from latency issues and input lag, which can be extremely frustrating during the combat, both when you're out of sync or your enemy is. Combat in itself is pretty weak at the moment, while they have tried to go for a more skill-focused system. With all the input issues and latency issues, fighting other players almost becomes a dance around each other and a draw of luck. That being said, there is still some skill required in terms of dodging and movement, especially in the fisticuffs. The more ranged battles are a pain in the arse. Seriously, it's incredibly hard to measure the distance of a player from you, thus, especially with bows, it's hard to account for the distance as the arrows are affected by the gravity in flight, so they dip. Ironically, unless you have a gun with ammo to spare, the easiest way to kill someone is to beat them to death with your fists or a melee weapon. In fact, thanks to the looting issues and the food issues and all that kind of thing, killing other players seems to have become the preferred way for other players to gain items, by taking them essentially from your cold dead corpse. In my opinion, the biggest redeeming feature of the game is the crafting system. By opening up your inventory and then selecting the crafting tab, you can craft recipes that you have learned. To learn new recipes, you hit the discovery tab where you can place different materials in to see if you can learn new things. The good thing about the discovery system, mind you, is that it does tell you how many recipes there are to learn with the item that you've put in, and that if you have any other items in your inventory to contribute to a recipe, they will be illuminated on the sidebar while everything else will be greyed out. So it's not kind of just throwing everything into a pot and seeing what comes out. It does kind of help you and direct you a little bit, which is quite good. I have to say that I did enjoy the crafting. There's a ton of stuff to craft, from weapons to housing, and it's all done in a very simplistic but fun way. Speaking of housing, I do enjoy the way SOE have implemented the player housing in H1Z1. Housing is not instanced like in most MMOs. That means should you come across someone else's shack and you can get in, you can get in. That's it. You can destroy other people's buildings, though it does take some considerable effort and it's not usually worth it. You can also fortify pre-built houses and buildings, so should you take a shine to a particularly nice suburban neighbourhood, you can just build barricades around the windows and doors and voila, a nice new house. Now let's talk about the Z word. Yes, zombies. After all, this is a zombie survival game, right? Well, actually, it's not. And don't get me wrong, it is supposed to be, but it isn't. The zombies in H1Z1 are pointless, utterly pointless. They currently have no discernible AI, and they just run after the path that you took rather than your actual character. So if you suddenly change direction, they stop for 2 seconds, and they then follow the direction that you changed to start following you again. It's actually quite hilarious to watch. Zombies are very easy to kill, which is fine. It's expected that individually zombies are weak, but like in other games and pop culture everywhere, they have strength in numbers. Problem is, of course, that in H1Z1, they don't have strength in numbers. You don't see any hordes, not even large groups. In fact, currently, the only thing zombies are good for in the game is cloth. So basically, they're H1Z1's equivalent to the starter zone mobs of World of Warcraft, that you basically farm for cloth and that's it. All this means is that your biggest threat in a zombie apocalypse is not the zombies, but starvation and other players. In fact, the combination of the current gameplay mechanics and issues lead to a video game version of the Hunger Games with the occasional harmless zombie. I really hope SOE addresses these current issues with the zombies quickly, especially quickly, because they need to make them into a bigger threat. There needs to be a hell of a lot more of them roaming the streets. I mean, it should be dangerous to openly walk the streets of a town. Instead, it's currently as safe as getting hit with a pillowcase. Now then, let's discuss the launch problems, specifically the uproar caused by airdrops. Essentially, in the in-game cash shop, you can buy airdrops. These airdrops will land a couple of 100 meters radius of you and will contain food, supplies, ammo, and weapons, specifically guns. A great many people got upset about this due to several quotes made many months ago by the developers saying that you wouldn't be able to buy guns and ammo in the in-game cash store. Now, that is true, they did say that. However, they have also stated since August 2014 that airdrops would contain the aforementioned items. So of course, there are cries of pay to win, and Reddit turned into a big old slinging match on launch. So here's my opinion on the matter. The developers did not lie, as some have claimed that they did. They did clearly change their stance, and they did make a pretty bad public relation faux pas in their statements, because you shouldn't if you're going to make a statement like you can't buy guns and ammo in game, then you should make it specifically clear what you're talking about. You can't just blanket that, because the statement is you cannot buy guns and ammo. If that's just the statement, then that applies to the whole game. That applies to every aspect, every facet of the game. And if that's not the case, then you need to be specific about that. So that was a really bad mistake by SOE. Look, developers, seriously, when it comes to that kind of thing, you do need to be crystal clear. That being said, many players will not have regularly followed the developer updates since the original remarks were made. So it's neither the player's fault either, because you can't expect loads and loads of players to just keep up with your updates all the time. They originally get excited about the game when it's first talked about, when it's first announced, and then pretty much a lot of people don't follow it after that until release. So you can't blame the players for not being up to date on the current knowledge of the game. Now, in terms of are airdrops pay to win, I have heard the arguments claiming that they are not, because it's a server event and anyone can claim the items. Now, while anyone can indeed claim the items, in my opinion, it doesn't change the fact that it's pay to win. Regardless of who gets the weapons, someone somewhere paid to have that equipment placed in the game. Therefore, without that cash, that player who received the items wouldn't have got those items, which undeniably gives them an advantage over other players. The argument over who receives the items in the end is irrelevant. A cash transaction took place for the weapons that the majority don't have access to, and by, that's pay to win. Now, that being said, skill does still come into play. For example, there was one instance where I had just spawned and went to the nearest town to get some gear. A guy who had much better armor and weapons than me thought it would be a great fun just to try and shoot me. After avoiding his initial onslaught, he began chasing me with an axe, and I only had a branch for a weapon. And then after a good 5-minute chase, I ran into a house and got fed up, hid behind the door, and as he came in, I skillfully moved around him to avoid his axe while constantly bashing at his head with my stick. He died, I got his stuff, and it was a pretty satisfying experience. Overall, H1Z1 is not terrible. It certainly has a laundry list of bugs and flaws, but it is certainly better than some, if not all, of its counterparts in early access. But is it worth the price tag? Well, for me, no. And the sole reason is this. Why would you want to pay to play an incomplete version of a game that upon launch will be free? Seriously, the game is a free-to-play MMO, so when it launches, it won't cost you money to play it. So unless you're dead set on playing it now because you're a fan of the game, you're a fan of SOE, or you just love the genre so much that you can't wait, I would seriously wait and save yourself the money and enjoy the good points of the game when it releases as a free-to-play MMO. Thanks for watching, everyone. Please do subscribe if you enjoyed the video. If you enjoy my work overall, please head over to my Patreon and support me there, and follow me on Twitter, and I'll see you next time.